Welcome back to another episode of Shift Happens. I'm Walter, and I'm joined as always by Within
I
and Michael.
Hey, good morning.
Today we're continuing our conversation about the road to the sale. In our last episode, we covered the importance of the meet and greet and the needs assessment, two foundational steps in the sales process. Now we're moving into the next three steps: vehicle selection, vehicle presentation or walk around, and the test drive. These are where the magic starts to happen because this is where customers start to visualize ownership. So let's dive in. Within, kick us off. Why is vehicle selection so critical in today's sales environment?
That's a great question, Walter. Vehicle selection is where you take all of the information that you gather during the needs assessment, what we used to call the qualification, and you actually apply it in the real world. The goal here is not just to pull keys for the first car you see or the car that's on special or the car that has the most bonuses on it. It's about finding the correct car based on what the customer told you and what you've been able to find out. So if they indicated that safety and performance, for instance, were their top priorities, you're not going to show them a stripped base model with the smallest engine and the fewest technical safety features. So this is the step where you prove that you listen to them and that you have the knowledge in your inventory and the options and features on your vehicles to be able to apply what they told you.
Hmm. So it's about listening and then being intentional with the recommendation.
Walter, you have to be able to listen to what the customer said as Within said. But, vehicle selection, it's about confidence and speed. You don't want to walk the customer by eight different vehicles or, like you said, pull out eight different sets of keys. You got to narrow it down. And so by listening and proving that you listen to them, it's like, listen, based on what you've told me and what we've discussed, I think I have the perfect vehicle for you. Let me show you what I've pulled up. It builds momentum, it builds trust in that conversation. The other thing too is they may have already gone online and looked at a particular vehicle in your inventory, and they say, "I want to go see that one." So if you've communicated them ahead of time, the smart salesperson, the one that's ready to do business, they've already got that unit pulled up. And so but you still want to say, "Hey, look, based on what you told me, this is the vehicle and this is the one I got. Are you sure this is what you're looking for?" Let's just get any other questions that may have arrived since we've last discussed this, and then go right into it and then roll with it.
Yep. And it's important always to narrow down the choices. Like you said, you don't want to walk them past 8, 10, 12 different cars. Uh, if they haven't chosen a specific one from inventory off of your website, or you haven't narrowed down to one, use the information that you've got to select one in your mind or on the computer screen in front of you at your desk, and then go get it and bring it to them. That way
Yeah,
you don't have them wandering around through the inventory and you're losing control.
yeah, and that's a great point with it because narrowing it down makes their decision a lot easier. And if you've discussed this with the customer before they walked in, you at least have an opportunity to do this. A fresh customer walking in, it might be a little difficult, but that's where the specific questions that you're asking when you're sitting down. A lot of folks make the mistake is, okay, let's go out and walk the lot. The first thing a good salesperson does is they sit them down. Let's talk about your wants, your needs, and your desires, especially here in New Orleans when it's 100 degrees out on the asphalt. Let's soak up that good air conditioning and find out what their needs are, and then go out and get that vehicle and bring it up close so they don't have to go out and bake in the sun.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
consultative. I mean,
Exactly, exactly.
we're professionals, and a professional doctor doesn't see a patient walk in and then just roll out a bunch of pills and say, which one of these look pretty to you? We'll just give you some of these big round ones and some of these little green ones, and we'll see what happens.
And the
Great.
other thing too is, time kills deals. Customers complain all along. It takes too darn long to go buy a new vehicle or even a used vehicle. By being ready and prepared to do business with the customer, and not wasting their time, being respectful and mindful of it, it's going to go a long way with your credibility and your opportunity to earn your business.
Great points. It's not about playing tour guide through the lot. It's about being laser focused. Let's move to the next step, the vehicle presentation or walk around. Within, what's the number one mistake salespeople make during the walk around?
Well, there's probably two main mistakes, and they're like polar opposites. One is to just dump everything they know about the car, just rattling off features. This is especially comical at a BMW or a Mercedes lot, where they sound suddenly like they're an episode of Sesame Street, reciting alphabets at random in random orders and random, means. This has ABC, BDC, VDC, VDS, ABCD, LMNOP, QRST, and so the feature dump, where a salesperson is invested a certain amount into product knowledge, but hasn't made the shift between rattling off different features by name, or even worse, by acronym, and picking the exact ones that apply based on the needs assessment to that customer, and then telling them what the benefit is of that feature. For instance, VDC, which is what several of the different manufacturers call vehicle dynamics control, or stability control, or electronic stability control, which is the most generic of the terms, which is basically a system that detects and then prevents the loss of control or a skid. And so a safety-minded customer that might drive in circumstances that are challenging, like New Orleans downpours, bad streets, bad traction, that sort of thing, won't appreciate just hearing VDC or ESC or any of that. Even, full-blown terms like StabiliTrak. They will appreciate that you tell them the benefit of a system that can detect the beginning of a skid before it's even felt in the seat of their pants, and then can apply controls to the different brakes and even the steering system, and counter a skid before it even takes place, so that most times, if their vehicle loses traction, or there's a challenging, corner, or something happens, and the vehicle could have possibly lost control, that the only sign that they'll have that anything happened at all will be a little orange light blinking on the dashboard a little bit that says, traction loss or ESC or whatever the particular light would be, and that it'll completely prevent, possibility of an accident, rollover, hitting another car, and just help protect them. So that's the idea of not giving a feature dump with a bunch of alphabets, but connecting one particular feature with their needs and then describing the benefit of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and let me just throw in this one tip. You got to engage the customer. One of the things I do, open the door, sit them down behind the wheel, get that seat, adjusted just right. Okay. How do they like it? They sit close to the wheel back, adjust the mirrors, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe even, when you sit down, you're starting to show them the new infotainment or, systems that they have. Pair their phone with them, show them how the Apple CarPlay or the Android system will work with it. There's so many different systems. And think about this. Somebody hadn't bought a car in 10 years, how the technology just behind the wheel has changed. So engaging them and having them understand, like you're talking about, within the features, the benefits, and now these advantages that are in this vehicle that they're looking at that maybe, in their research they weren't aware of. And again, especially, like I said, somebody who's trading a car or driving a vehicle that might be 8 or 10 years old. So you turn in a presentation into an experience. And when it's an experience, what are they doing? They're taking mental ownership. Okay.
Exactly.
And one of the things I used to throw out years ago, and y'all know I used to sell custom vans and trucks, and I'd have the driver, husband or wife, whoever, behind the wheel, and it's like, where are you going to take this first van? This van when oh, and they got it already mapped out in their head, driving to Orlando to Disney World in it. Well, right
Painting a
then
picture for
there,
them.
exactly, right then and there, I know they've taken mental ownership, and it's just a matter of working out the numbers. But if you don't take the time to make it an experience, let them make mental ownership of it, then you're going to be dealing strictly with price. And that's nobody's going to win that race, okay? You want to build value, from the moment you open the hood or you open the door, and you start that walk around. Because if not, again, you're wasting their time, and it's just going to be a hassle trying to get them to agree on numbers.
Hmm.
Yep.
So
You need to build value and make a connection.
Okay, yeah. So connection over data, benefits over features, and engagement
Absolutely.
over monologue.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now let's talk about the big emotional moment, the test drive. Within, why is a test drive more than just a quick loop around the block?
Well, for the same reason that a benefit is more important than an alphabet. And you have to engage, connect, and help them take mental ownership of the vehicle. Uh, if they just ride in the passenger seat for 2 minutes, that's no kind of ownership. They don't feel a connection. And of course, the other big side of it is if you just drive them around the block and there's issues with the vehicle, that can turn into a heat customer after delivery. But if you take them on a long, carefully mapped out test drive that goes over multiple areas that are applicable to their life and how they're going to be using that automobile, then if there are any issues, they come up before anything moves along too far, and you can address them and take care of them. It might be something as simple as helping to adjust the mirrors ahead of time, or change the way that the radio responds, or to show them where the controls are for the cruise control on the steering wheel, or whatever it might happen to be. But a real quick blast, in the car around the block is not going to help them take mental ownership, but it's also not going to make sure that the vehicle is correct for them under the conditions that they're going to be driving it. And
Yeah.
it's where the sale becomes real.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with, and the route definitely matters. We always had a set route, for a couple of reasons. One, safety. Something were to happen, while you're out on that route. But it was a combination of, driving in, basic routes, a little bit of highway, so they could get it up to, ramp up speeds and then merging into traffic just to see how the fit and the feel of it would be. We had one guy that worked with us, and he used to love to show how the anti-lock braking systems used to work. And he'd get the car up to about 50 miles an hour, and he'd slam on the brakes and scare the wits out of the passengers. But he was demonstrating the functionality of, like you're talking about, that StabiliTrak. Um, Not recommended today, but the idea was to show the features and a benefit of that particular
Yeah.
system. But to
Yeah.
the point is, you want to make sure you're taking them away from the dealership environment too. I used to go, there was a park near us, and you could stop and get out and kind of look at it in a just a different environment. It was neutral, and they could just take a look at it, and you know it's just all about. That's where the salesperson always drove off the lot. Okay, that's the first thing.
Yep. It
When you
was a
went to
safety
that,
fact. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah, and
that's a
so
primary safety issue, but it's also an issue of having control, making the customer feel comfortable at first.
yeah,
Uh, and I can give a quick anecdote of why the salesperson driving off the lot is so important. There was a salesperson that we trained and we came back to later on, and yeah, he took some shortcuts here and there. And one time, he just jumped in, and the customer kind of assumed, and he let the customer go in the driver's seat, and they took off for the thing, and the customer's just going, well, this thing's sluggish. I don't know. And what's that horrible smell? You know, the customer, not being familiar with the car, didn't see the little brake light and didn't realize that, well, he didn't put, the emergency brake on when he parked the car, but at the dealership they did. So he drove about 3 blocks with the emergency brake on in this brand new car, ruined the rear brake pads, of course. And, obviously, either between his dissatisfaction with the car, or, the smell, or just being embarrassed, that sale was blown.
yeah, and that's a great point. You get in that vehicle, and here again, we're assuming a lot when we brought that vehicle up to that customer. If it's ahead of time, first thing, make sure it's got fuel. The last thing you want to do is run out of gas on a test drive. I mean, that you talk about embarrassing and cost you a sale. But make sure everything's operational, and that's even more important if it's a used vehicle that you're demonstrating with the customer. Okay. But the idea of you take it off the lot, you go into a neutral site, as I said, that's why you do the switch over. And as I was talking about earlier, that neutral site, you walk around the vehicle, you're doing a quick walk around, let's say, about some of the things you talked about when you were still on the lot. But
Yeah,
that's where you get them,
continuation, right?
yeah, and that's where you sit them in a car, get everything adjusted for them to their liking so that they're comfortable and get them to ease into it. So if it's in a neutral place, they can, check the throttle, check the brakes, make sure your mirrors are correct, and then just ease into the drive. And the thing about it is, when you start asking questions about the car or the truck or SUV, whatever, how does that feel? You're looking for positive answers here, right? Does it have a good feel to you? How is that, the acceleration? Is it what you expected? Yes. Is it a comfortable ride? You're not feeling a whole lot of these potholes, like we got here in New Orleans. And, it's a comfortable ride. Yeah. Okay. So you want to get all as many positive questions because they're concentrating on driving a car. They're not thinking about how they're going to respond. You want them to do this, okay? Shake their head and give them positive yeses. And the more yeses you get, the easier it's going to be when you pull up into the driveway at the dealership again. And you start
Yep.
asking some closing questions, which is what we're going to get into in our next episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Starting out with the salesperson driving, the other thing that they can do is they can turn on certain features that the customer would have a hard time finding in a brand new unfamiliar car where they might not have even had these features before. And of course, we're talking about running the air conditioning for 20 minutes before they get near the car down in New Orleans. But I mean, in other climates, you want to turn on the heated seats and the heated steering wheel and that sort of thing well before they get in the car. So their first impression getting in the passenger seat is, oh, this thing is toasty. And then their first impression when you've driven a while, taken them, through a little bit of a route and then found that good turnover spot is, oh, the steering wheel's nice and comfortable and toasty too. It becomes important for multiple reasons that the salesperson drive first, safety, taking control, connection, but also, better being able to show the benefits of direct features because they can control them and show them to the customer while they're in the driver's seat. And then the customer can use those features when they've switched places and they're driving back with the vehicle.
Yeah, the worst thing that can happen is, you actually make the sale on a vehicle, and then a week or two later they come back and they ask a question about a feature that you didn't get a chance to go over, and you're embarrassed because you know it's a feature that really and truly they may have paid more for the vehicle if they knew it was on there. I mean, I had a lady that I ran into. I didn't sell her the vehicle, but she had a Highline Infinity vehicle, and she was talking about well, what it was is my Buick. I have the remote pre-start, and so I did that while I was sitting there conversing with her. And she says, "Boy, I wish my car had that." And I said, "It does." And she goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "You got your keys on you?" She says, "Yeah." I said, "Give me your keys." So I walked up over. I said, "Here, let me show you." And I pressed two buttons on her Infinity, and it started right up. She says, "I've been driving this thing a year and a half, and I didn't know I had that feature." Okay. I mean, so imagine the Infinity salesperson who actually sold that vehicle to this lady. I mean, he left money on the table because there was a feature she
Yeah,
probably would have paid more for, knowing that it was there. And you
no
see,
excuse at all unless
none,
it,
none,
maybe it's LA or something where
no,
where you don't have to
no.
warm up or cool off a vehicle.
But that's where the salesperson has to know the vehicle that they're presenting. Okay. Base model car may not have had that feature. Okay. If it was the Nissan Pathfinder base model, okay, maybe it didn't have it. But an Infinity, the Infinity SUV, yeah, absolutely it's going to have it. Okay. And
But you do
so
have to know your vehicles and not make any
that's
assumptions
exactly right. That's
because
exactly
remote
right.
start is an optional feature on most BMWs, or at least many BMWs.
Right. But the key here is, here's a lady who had a car, paid good money for it, and had no idea. that this feature was even optional or available or included in the car she purchased. I'll go one step further. We had a deal we were doing years ago. We were selling Mazdas, and a lady came in about 2 weeks after the sale, and she was complaining. She said, every time I put a CD in, it eats it. I said, what do you mean it eats it? She said, I put it in and nothing happens. Well, what
Mm.
happened is she had a 6 disc in-dash loader for her
Oh,
disc player, and the salesperson didn't inform her that it wasn't just a single load.
I remember
She couldn't
those.
figure out how it worked. And I'm thinking, I remember the deal. We were $500 away from making a deal, and we had to cut it to get her over the curb. Now imagine if the salesperson had done his job and said, it's got a 6 disc in-dash CD player. I mean, at the time it was, probably worth, $400 or $500 as an add-on. Maybe we
Yep.
wouldn't have had to cut to gross.
Oh,
And that's what I'm saying. You got to know
I
your
actually
and your
saw an even
features.
worse version of that. We once took a trade in. I think it might have been a BMW. No, it was a Porsche. That's right. And in the trunk, they had the CD changer, and it still had the factory strip over it. So the CD changer in the trunk, I think it might have been a 6 or a 10, had never been used by this guy in 2.5 years. And I
Mm.
guarantee you it's because no one told him about it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you probably think it's, an amp, or some other computer system, for the car, just not recognized. And of course, back then you had the big carriages, where you could load, uh, into it on a 10 disc, just load them up and put the cartridge in rather than not a carriage. But yeah, but it goes to saying, again, I'll go back to my days selling vans. I could sit there and talk 2 hours on a conversion van, because they had so many different features and benefits and things for the consumer. In the early 90s, selling a Chevy Cavalier, it didn't take long to do a walk around, okay? But you still had to build value, even though it was an entry-level car, because it had a lot of safety features that a lot of its contemporaries didn't. And that's how you distinguish your product from somebody else that they may be competing against. So, when you wrap up all of this stuff that we're talking about, the vehicle selection, the test drive, the walk around, the presentation, and all of these things here. It's so critical. Again, product knowledge, product awareness of what you have on a lot, and there's resources available. I mean, my goodness, that's what our clients rely on and have for over 30 years.
Yeah, the advanced research is an amazing tool uh, for the Advanta-STAR client to be able to look at the benefits and features and be able to wrap their minds around them and get ready for a walk around and a test drive. And so when you're on the demonstration drive and you're the salesperson and you're driving first, you can explain different things that might startle or turn off a customer. One big thing is something that's really in the news now, and we don't know if it'll be on the vehicles much longer, but that's the automatic start stop system.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I hate the feature. Absolutely hate it.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's really weird because it's not taken into account on the EPA fuel mileage figures that are on the sticker of the car.
Hmm. That's
And
interesting.
so,
It was supposed to be a gas fuel savings, right? That's
yeah,
how it's sold.
but in the EPA test cycle, it can't really engage because of the technicalities of how the cycle works and how the vehicles are rigged. And so it's not taken into account on the sticker. So why would car makers spend all the extra on, bigger, beefier starters and bigger, deeper cycle batteries to make this feature work, you might ask.
Yeah, I mean
Go ahead, someone ask.
the first time I got behind the wheel of one of these was a rental car, and I couldn't understand what the hell was going on. And I was in traffic driving in Houston, and if you drive or live in Houston, bumper to bumper on
Yeah.
Katy Freeway, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the worst place I've heard.
It's nuts. And so I'm like, every time and you couldn't disengage it. At least with the newer models, you have the override where you can disengage it. I will tell you, I had a beautiful Buick Enclave Avenir. I loved it. The only thing I hated, I couldn't disengage that start stop.
Yep, I drove a Buick LaCrosse, and Dad, was there a way to turn it off, the start stop thing? I don't think so. It,
No, and well, that's the thing. Start stop originally got its start, if you'll excuse the half pun, with hybrids. Uh,
hmm,
the Buick LaCrosse hybrid with the 2.5 Ecotec hybrid engine. Uh, One of the ways that hybrids save the fuel mileage is they turn off whenever they can.
hmm. I
And
Yeah.
think
so on the hybrid, there's never almost never going to be a disable button.
okay, yeah, because I think maybe there was if I Googled it, it said if you turn this stick this way and press it 4 times and then turn it this way and then raise the blinker and like there was some very convoluted way of turning it off maybe, but I could never figure it out.
Yet people have come up with a few different ways. I mean, obviously, most of the vehicles, especially the ones that aren't hybrids, have a disable switch, but you have to hit it every single time
Hmm.
because, and this is why manufacturers put in, if it doesn't reset every time you turn the car on with the start stop button or with the key, they don't get a corporate average fuel economy credit. And
Hmm.
that's why that button is there, because they adjust the figures for the corporate average fuel economy, even if they don't adjust the figures on the sticker, so that manufacturers can get bigger credits or they can avoid bigger fines by installing the start stop automatic system on as many vehicles as possible.
Yeah, and that goes a long way with what I was saying before. Every time you get in a vehicle, there's a little button that has a big, capital A with a lamp on it. And it's like, that's the first thing I hit as soon as I get in the car. And it's just inconvenient. And you talk about the starters. To me it's a warranty nightmare that's going to happen, not maybe to the first owner, but the second owner or the third, where you're going to get stranded somewhere because this thing didn't re-engage and you're at a traffic stop or worse.
Yeah.
And somebody behind you is going to run into the back end of you. So the other feature, while we're talking about these things, is the automatic braking systems. Here again, some vehicles, they'll give you an alert by, either buzzing the seat or you'll see on my vehicle, on the Buick, on the Buick in Enclave, it's got a set of lights that'll, go across the dashboard and alert you to, a vehicle that came to a sudden stop, but you have to manually hit the brakes. You know, the manual systems will engage whether you want them to or not. Again, you driving in the city, again, I'll use Houston. I was driving through there again, rental car, um, downtown Houston, and you got interchanges on top of interchanges. So you've got concrete pillars and posts everywhere near the traffic lanes. Okay. So it looks like you're going straight on into one of these pillars and then it veers, dramatically right or left. Well, the computer, eye is looking at that. They don't know that it veers to the right in just a few feet. It's going to automatically apply that brake thinking that you don't see and can react quick enough. And if it hits the brakes, and when you're in a rain situation, which I was, you're going to lose control of the vehicle. And I damn near ran into, one of those, impact dividers, because the car thought it was too smart, for the situation. So, if I have a chance to disengage that, that's the next button I'm turning off because I
Yep.
Yep.
want to be in control of that vehicle stopping, not some random ass computer.
But
Yep. Totally agree.
again, it points out the importance of the salesperson driving first so that they can deal with those features because they should be familiar with them and explain them to the customer, and the customer isn't startled by them. But like I said, the start stop may not be an issue much longer. First of all, uh, like I said, the primary incentive is to avoid corporate average fuel economy fines. And the new spending and tax law, those fines have been removed.
Yeah, well, they're adjusting the corporate average fuel economy requirements, with the new administration. They're rolling back what a lot of people in the industry perceive were unattainable by only means by, a certain, number of electric vehicles being on the road. And based on the sales and the acceptance of EVs at this point, it's just not achievable. At some time in the future, they will be, but just, not by 2030 or 2035. They're just unrealistic. And so, while we're talking about some of these features, it's very important with it. And you brought this out. You've been around like I have when anti-lock brakes first came on the scene. Totally
Yep.
different braking feel on the foot pedal when you applied the brake with an ABS system versus one without it.
Totally
And
different way that you're supposed to react in an emergency. I mean,
correct. And so,
we're old enough, we were taught pump the brakes. Uh, and it's an interesting thing to note. I mean, I love anti-lock brakes. They're an amazing piece of technology. They work really, really well. I mean,
absolutely couldn't agree
the
more.
primary thing they do, they do shorten stopping distances under almost all conditions. But the primary thing they do is you can stand up on the brake pedal and your vehicle does not lose the ability to steer. In fact, it actually is able to steer better because the weight transfers onto the steering wheels. And, so they're amazing. But insurance companies that gave credits for anti-lock brake equipped vehicles in the very early days of anti-lock brakes stopped giving those credits after a couple of years because the rate of accidents with anti-lock brakes didn't go down.
Yeah, it actually went up. There was an issue years ago with Ford Crown Victoria with police interceptor vehicles. And
Oh yeah.
you and I talked about that,
And the
before.
Caprices, yeah.
Yeah, the problem is, again, we're trained pump the brakes. So when you get behind the wheel the first time and you get that feedback against your foot, what's your first natural reaction?
Pull
Pull your
away.
foot
Well,
off.
that's
Okay.
what the civilian does. The
Well,
state
but
troopers and the police, though, they're rigidly trained to pump the brakes. And
not,
so
yeah, exactly. But at first, when they
what
got behind
happened
the wheel of these
was,
ABS, they
well, no,
did.
no, no.
No, what
They
happened
they
was,
did pump the. Hold on, just a sec. So if uh if your maiden aunt hits the thing and it vibrates and she lifts off, that's one thing. But what happened was the police, especially the state troopers, when they got in a situation, they'd automatically pump the brakes like they were taught. They were taught to pump them real fast. And do you know what happens to a vehicle, especially the earlier ones, when you pump the brake pedal? The ABS gets overridden and fails, and it can actually lose all braking for several seconds. Because what happens when you pump the brake is there's a feedback with the regulator pump inside an ABS system, and the ABS system sees it as a major fault, and you can lose braking for several seconds when you pump the brakes, especially if you do it aggressively, like the police are taught in their aggressive driving training.
yeah, well, the reports that I read were a little bit different than what you're reporting. The reports that I read was their natural reaction was just like your aunt, take your foot off the brake, which reduced the amount of stopping time. My understanding of how the brake systems work is you can't physically pump the brake as fast as an ABS system can
Yeah,
modulate the brake pressure to each of the four wheels on a four-wheel
yeah.
ABS system. So the
Also,
problem was,
it's individual too, and so that's why you maintain the control, because unlike just pumping the brakes yourself, which acts on all four brakes equally, the ABS system does it individually at each separate wheel.
yeah, because you got different traction points on each wheel. And the
Yep.
whole idea of the ABS is not just to stop the vehicle, it's to stop it in a controlled measure. But what was happening is the state troopers and other law enforcement were literally getting killed because the vehicles
Yep.
weren't stopping because they either weren't properly trained or they were going back to their original training, as you were pointing out, pump it so many darn times Okay. Whereas the true function is just stand on the brake. Again,
Right.
you and I drove cars in the 60s and the 70s, those vehicles, totally different braking systems. And the ones
Oh
that
yeah.
are out there now have totally different controlled systems. I mean, not a whole lot of cars in the 60s and 70s, other than, high-end sports cars had four-wheel disc brakes. It's totally different stopping with disc and drum or four-wheel drum, than what we
Yep.
have now. But again, getting back to the ABS systems, the big thing was, and the point I was looking to make was, if you weren't schooled on how this works and applies, you were subject. I got behind of a pickup truck. It was a 99 model GMC Sierra. And I mean, literally, I had both feet standing on the brake to get this darn thing to stop because it seemed like it was taking longer to stop than a
Yeah.
regular braking system.
That
I
brings up a
ran into the
whole
back
different
end of
dynamic.
another vehicle because
Yep.
I wasn't used to that particular new system that they had in that truck. And so,
Yep.
like I said,
That was
being
a
in the
certain
industry,
specific system that General Motors did to apply anti-lock brakes to a lot of vehicles very inexpensively. They eliminated the accumulator pump. So what would happen is if there was a loss of traction, it would pump the brakes, but at a certain point, there was no more pumping because there wasn't a there wasn't an actual pump to put the pressure back in.
yeah. And like I said, scared the wits out of me. And I was like, I've never had a vehicle, where I couldn't control it. And it was a reasonable amount of time to stop. There was a little, it just started to drizzle. And so there was a traction issue there, like you're
Big
saying.
traction issue, yeah, at the
But
beginning of
man,
a rain, yeah.
yeah. Now the other thing that people don't realize is when you put cruise control on with an ABS system, okay, and you get into a traction system. I had a Buick LaCrosse that just went absolutely nuts. I'm in a rainstorm. I got the cruise control on, and you hit a puddle doing highway speeds, and it doesn't know how to react.
Oh, that would be stability control, not
That,
not
well, I'm
anti-lock
sorry,
brakes.
stability control, not ABS, but the ABS is
Stability or
obviously,
traction control,
yeah,
depending on
yeah.
exactly what happened.
Oh, yeah. And it just, I
Because the
mean,
cruise control wants to keep the power because
maintained,
it sees your look, it sees the speeds going down, so it gives it more power. And then the traction control says, "Hey, we have no traction," and it cuts the power back. And the two systems are arguing in
they're
the back
conflicting.
room.
That's
They're
exactly right.
slapping each other back, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're slowing down. No,
Uh-huh.
we're losing
Yeah.
traction. Stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. Stability control and cruise control don't mix. If it starts raining, I turn it off.
Oh,
Turn it off.
oh, yeah, even worse. There, well, I had the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. It's like, a car that takes 10 minutes to tell people what you got. And on the forums, they had these people, yeah, I was driving along in the rain and my car just spun all over the place. Well, the regular Giulia has three modes on its driving system. Uh, E for efficiency, N for normal, and uh, S for sport.
Probably.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. The Julia the Quadrifoglio had one more, Corsa, for race.
Yeah.
And when you turned it on race, suddenly the exhaust opens all the way up and it just goes, rah, that sounds really, 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 awesome. 3/4 of a Ferrari engine. And so these guys just put it in race all the time, ignoring the fact that race turned off all the stability control. And so they're driving along and they hit a little uneven patch and the car would just swap ends. And they were mad at the car when you put it in race and the dashboard lights up. It tells you, ESC off, traction off, all this stuff.
Hmm.
It warns you that this stuff is off.
Yeah.
But they just liked it to be noisy, and so they just turned it over to the Corsa.
2 words, operator error.
Oh yeah. You should never use cruise control in any inclement weather or poor traction conditions whatsoever. I mean,
Absolutely. Totally agree.
yeah,
But
yeah,
but
I'm driving on the beach. Let me put on cruise control. Yeah,
yeah.
no, I'm I'm doing the Rubicon. Let me put on cruise control. No, 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 no.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, one of the things, and we're talking about a lot of things in this segment. It's really important for the salespeople to be as thorough as they can, because ultimately, we're talking about people's lives behind the wheel of a vehicle, okay?
And their
Um,
comfort.
and well, the comfort for sure, but you don't want anybody to get killed or seriously injured because there was a feature that you didn't go over or go over enough to warrant where somebody, may be in a situation that they didn't expect. And again, a vehicle that they're not real familiar with, they take ownership of, they get in a car and they're going to do a trip, and they're
Yep.
in a situation that they have no idea how this vehicle is going to react. They remember how their 10-year-old vehicle did, and it's completely different. So being
Oh
thorough
yeah.
with everything is just so important, and it's really something that we don't in the industry talk enough about. And
Yep.
I will say this, we talked in one of the other episodes about when Dodge launched the 1994 Ram pickup truck, and we went through extensive training on what the truck could do, but we also were taught what it couldn't do. All right. People think that you got a truck, you can pull the world with it. Okay. And, I have a little thing I do called truck training. And one of the things that we talk about is you can't ask a truck to do something it wasn't designed to do. And so when somebody's coming to you and said, yeah, I've got a truck and I want a truck and I'm going to trailer this and, I'm going to do this with it and that with it. We were taught how to recommend and job rate the vehicle for the job.
Job rate,
The tr-
load rate, trailer
Okay,
rate, job rate. Yep.
correct. So we knew what our capacities were. And, quite honestly, back then with just a regular cab pickup, there were certain things that the truck just wasn't designed to do, and they had to look at alternatives. Not so much the case today, but the point I'm looking to make is, you've got people that'll hook up something to the back end of a truck, and you drive on highway like I do, and you see these things just slapping. The front wheels are popping off the ground. Why? Because they got too much in the back, or the load in the back is weaving back and forth, oscillating because they don't have the proper trailering equipment, or the trailer weighs
Bad
too
weight
much for
distribution. Yeah.
exactly. You know, and this is critical because people, there's a reason why they have way stations around the interstate to make sure those big tractor trailers aren't overloaded and unsafe for the regular public. But the same holds true for the individual owners who drive passenger truck or just even a half-ton truck, because you
Yeah.
see big dualies pulling what, 25, 30, 40,000 pound rigs behind them. Okay. And, they got to make sure the truck, because the weakest link that fails, you're going to have an accident.
Yep.
And, so again, I stress safety and the importance of knowing, the capabilities of these, because ultimately it's your responsibility as a salesperson to make sure that customer, they have a good working understanding of what the capacities are and the limits of what these vehicles can do.
Goes back to need assessments and choosing the right vehicle for them.
Absolutely.
And it in two instances, people get a false sense of security. One with four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive systems, and two with towing. And they're both the same thing. Oh, if I can get it moving, I'm good. In other words, if the all-wheel drive will get you moving in that snow, well, then I'm perfectly safe. I can do 90 miles an hour. But getting a vehicle moving and stopping it or turning it are two completely different things. And it's the same with towing. Yeah, you might be able to pull that 20,000 load with that 1,500 vehicle, with that 1,500 truck. You might be able to get up to highway speeds and, the engine's just straining a little bit. But controlling it, you know, the road just goes into a gentle bend and suddenly that trailer is wagging the truck around. It's throwing the back axle over or stopping it. And, especially if God forbid, the trailer brake system fails. And that's why the
If it
job
has
rating is
one,
so important.
yeah, if it has a
Yeah.
trailer brake, you
Oh
know,
yeah. Well,
federal
then
law now.
you'll find out real quick if you have a load more than, 4,000 pounds, legally, I think the limit is
Five
15.
5,000 pounds, you're required to carry a electric trailer brake. Okay, but that wasn't the
Yep.
case before.
No,
Okay,
the recommendation is 2,000, right? So if you're even doing 4,000 pounds, you'll find out real quick what it means to not be able to control your load just when you go down that first block, because that you come gently to the first four-way stop sign, that trailer is going to be jacking you all around. It's going to be like, I don't want to stop.
yeah, I mean, as far as safety is concerned, first thing is you got to be able to contain whatever it is you're pulling. You got to contain the load, and you got to be able to move it safely. But the other thing too is you may get it started in the snow, but you got to stop it in the snow. Okay. The truck might weigh 3,500 pounds, but you're pulling 5,000 pounds. What is it? F equals M times A.
Yep.
The back's pushing you forward and
And
trying to
most
control,
trailers,
so I said the trailer, that's why you have to have a trailer brake. You know,
trailers, almost all trailers over, 1,000 or 2,000 pounds have trailer brakes, but I don't know of any trailer that has anti-lock brakes.
None of them do. None of them do. But, those are recent laws on the books. I can give you a true story. I was driving from Atlanta to Augusta on Interstate 20, and this guy had an early 90s model Chevrolet pickup truck, extended cab, half ton, and he's pulling a trailer. And the trailer was probably 30 feet long.
Oh,
And the trailer itself, it was an older trailer. It wasn't, anything new because it looked like he was moving it from one piece of property to another. And of course, it's not like here in New Orleans. It's up and down, hill country,
he was
winding.
probably taking a sandbag collection with him too.
Well, the thing about it is we're doing about 70 miles an hour and I'm, half a, you know, mile behind him. I'm watching this thing and the trailer starts oscillating back and forth. And he's going up and down and it's doing this. And I'm like, this is not going to end good. And the geography and, excuse me, the topography, in valleys there, he started going back and forth where the back end of the trailer clipped the side of the road. And truck and trailer went spinning down the highway. Trailer just disintegrated.
Oh yeah.
And the truck wound up on his side. Guy was killed.
Oh
Okay.
no.
Because he was asking something of that truck to do that it wasn't designed to do. And it was sad, like I said, debris all over the road. Nobody else got killed. It was but nobody touched him. It was just the situation, the vehicle
Dynamics.
was the dynamics. That's it. He didn't have any of the stability for the trailer. How you got,
Or it was overridden because it was too heavy. I mean,
well,
an anti-sway system on either the electronic on the vehicle, which it did not have,
it didn't have any of that. It just,
no,
he was
or
trying to do
a
too much with the
mechanical
truck.
stabilizer anti-sway system can only contain so much weight. You can't put a stabilizer sway bar system on a trailer and have it do 3 times the weight that it was designed for.
Well, exactly. And we're coming up on 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. I remember with these trucks that were overloaded,
Oh yeah.
pulling debris. And I mean, they're bouncing all over. And there's no way these things were legal. And beside dumping junk all over the highway, these things were, a hazard to kill people just because you couldn't control the trucks with the load. So anyway, I'll get off the soapbox, but again, the point I'm trying to make is as a salesperson, you got to make the proper recommendation, especially when it comes to trucks, especially when it comes to trailering and towing, because it could cost the customer their life if you don't do it the right
Yeah.
way.
For their peace of mind, your peace of mind, and the liability on you and the dealership, really.
Yeah, you don't want to say, yeah, that truck will pull 10,000 pounds, and then the dealer's got to buy it back because it's been in service 3 times because the transmission and the differential is all torn up. No, you better
Yeah.
know your product. Seen that happen too.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you and it really helps out.